Welcome to Ty and Rye, the Finance Guys Market Mini Report, a short podcast that updates you on the past week's important topics and trends. Remember, this is not an offer to sell, and past performance does not guarantee future returns. Here are Ty Hansen and Ryan Robertson.
Welcome to another Market Mini. This is for the week ending August 13th. Appreciate your time and listen, and happy to share a little bit of market data with you. All in all, it was a pretty decent week. The market's up just under 1%. Things looked pretty good. The two biggest losers this week, small cap and NASDAQ, were both down. So tech was down about 0.25%, small cap down about 1%. Really, the kind of where we're seeing the growth and the gains right now are in more of the value play, right? Like the Dow Jones, the more seasoned steady eddies, right? That's where we're seeing the growth right now, seeing the returns. Crypto's also on a little bit on their tear right now, still doing really, really well, seeing double-digit returns there this last week as well. Not a lot of information, market data that came out this week. Next week we have a little bit of housing data, things like that. But this week, the main piece was, so we're seeing that consumer sentiment, right? Which consumer sentiment is how does, mom and pa on, out in the market feel about things that are going on. And consumer sentiment was actually down quite a bit, as we're coming into the month of August. Again, how much value do we put into that? I don't know. It's more of a qualitative measurement, but what it tells us though is that the average Jane and Joe investor out there are definitely feeling more like they're not as confident, over the next little bit. Over the next upcoming few months and throughout the next, the rest of this year as far as the market's trading. Again, still seeing good economic data. In fact, this last week, Disney posted their earnings report and it was awesome. They blew it out of the water, totally blew out the expectations that they had. And, are seeing some phenomenal information since COVID hit as far as they're concerned. So again, does Disney predict all? No, but just showing you that this trend of really good earnings reports, that trends that really is continuing. So, one other little piece I wanted to dive into, Ryan's not here today. He was tied up a little bit, so I'm going solo. And since he's not here, I'm going to go a little technical, for just a little bit. Because there's kind of this idea of, okay, where are we at? Bear market people will say that, hey, we're due for a really big correction. And people that are more bullish in the market are thinking, hey, we're going to, bull, they've got the horns, that's going up, right? So people think it's going up. Now, I try not to be bullish or bearish. I try to just really see what's happening more short term in the market and how does that relate to some of the fundamental trends that we're seeing, right? However, though, as I've kind of looked at some data this week, some of the different analysts that I read, when we look at, so there's a couple ways to look at it. You can either look at the Shiller 10-year price to earnings, which is kind of like a trailing average over the last 10 years of where price to earnings has been, right? And if you look at that definitely projects that we are due for a little bit more of a correction. However, one of the analysts that I like to follow did a little bit of a deep dive into looking at more of price over actual cash flow, right? So like cash flow plus dividends and buybacks within the stock company, within the actual company themselves. And so it's really like, okay, how much cash flow is going on compared to what their price is at, right? There's a few different ways you can look at these ratios to, again, it's not an exact science, but have a more educated feel about what's going on. And as we look at that and compare that, there's been previous bull sectors, right, or bull market trends, right, where we see these periods of sustained growth. As we look at the last two, right, end of the 1940s into the 1960s was the first one, and then early 80s into early 2000s before the dot-com bubble burst. that was another sustained, growth period. So those are the last two periods we looked at. As we look at this current bull market, right? As far as where those low points were in those periods previously, and where they ended up, before that cycle ended, we're actually still below that peak as far as this calculation tells us by about 30 or 40%. Okay. So a lot of moving pieces there, but long and short, what looking at this price to cash ratio, and I'm kind of dumbing it down a little bit, but what this tells us is, looking at cash flows and buybacks and dividends that are occurring in the market, we actually still have a little bit more room for growth than most people think. Again, just a little piece, food for thought here. I like to get people thinking about what's going on in the market to kind of think past and look past, what talking heads are talking about. So, again, does that mean that all is well and we should just throw a ton of money at stocks? Not necessarily. There's definitely still some risk, that's at the doorstep, but it's not all doom and gloom like everybody is saying, right? I'm still actually pretty optimistic about the market from the economic data I'm seeing, from some of this other, analytical data that I'm seeing here. And so some pretty interesting stuff. Hopefully that's something you can, chew on for this next week. And appreciate your listen. Again, check us out at tyandrye.com is our podcast website. Appreciate you listening and have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening to Ty and Rye, the Finance Guys. This is our weekly market mini report. New episodes of this will be put out every Monday, so make sure you don't miss those. Also, the longer podcasts, more in-depth discussions, those will drop every Saturday. So subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube at Ty and Rye Podcast. That way you don't miss any new episodes. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you have a great week.